I don't blame the average layman on the street for thinking that this stuff is trash, because let me tell you, it is. None of those horoscopes work. And the reason is very simple. You see,
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Whale Experiment. In this episode, we're talking all about astrology, a type of divination that involves the forecasting of earthly human events through the observation and interpretation of the fixed stars, the sun, the moon, and the planets. Astrology can also provide meaningful perspectives on mental health and emotional well-being. In a world when stress, anxiety, and depression are widespread, many individuals are turning to astrology not only for guidance but also for comfort and a deeper understanding in their mental health journeys. On the line with me is May Sim, founder of Selfstrology Academy, Asia's #1 psychology astrology academy for personal development and career transformation. Listen on to make the world a better place. And I'm ready to die. Hi May, thank you so much for taking the time out today. I am incredibly excited to share this space and deep dive into the world of astrology with you.
I'm really happy to be here and an opportunity to talk about astrology for mental wellness. I'm very happy to be here.
Astrology is such a unique and transformative field. More often than not, it is a deeply personal journey. What was the turning point or pivotal moment in your life that led you to dedicate yourself to astrology, and how has that shaped your journey?
The journey to astrology, for a lot of people who take astrology as seriously as I have, for the most part, I think we just go into it as a hobby. I don't think there's ever been an intention that you're going to do this like professionally, for me and all the other professional astrologers out there in the world. But I think like most people, I knew my sun sign. Okay, so even from a young age, like you would just read random things here and there about your sign. But I understood from a very young age that I didn't resonate with my sign. So unlike most people who get into astrology, oh my God, I love it. It wasn't like that for me, because I happen to be a sun sign Taurus. But if you compare, my experience of my own personality was nothing like Taurus. I have a very strong entrepreneurial side to my personality. I'm also a very bossy, dominating personality, which is nothing like Taurus, which is supposed to be a lot more easygoing. So for the longest time, I was really honestly quite skeptical about astrology. I was interested in it from like, oh, it's so fun sort of idea, but to do this professionally is like no way, you know. But I think it's only when the opportunity showed up. The internet is a great place, because then I got to use things like chart generators. And a lot of people who are so called into astrology have never actually seen their astrological chart, the whole thing with the planets and all that stuff. So when I first got into contact with that, I suddenly realized that, oh my God, yeah, so astrology isn't just the sun sign. And that was when I decided I wanted to learn everything that there was to learn in astrology. So if you're asking about a pivotal point, because up to this point, everything I've described is just about the story of everybody who's interested in astrology. At some point, they have the exact same story, you know. But what I'm about to say is also not like this super big story. I think everybody gets there. You know, when you're young, you get into a job, right? You're there because you are just there, lah. You needed a job and you're just there, right? But I think that there comes a point in just about everyone's life where you just question what you really want to do with your life. And at the time when I made the switch, I was about 24, 25 years old, and I was in a career that most people would consider to be a bright future, because at that age I was already general manager of my company. So most people would say, okay, you are on a trajectory to like a high income and that kind of stuff. So I did get there. It's very weird when you decide to, the feeling seems very strong that you want to walk away from all of that, which makes no practical sense at all. So I think it's that period of time where you sort of really wonder if you're looking for that meaning. And I found it in my part-time job, because I was reading charts for people on the weekends. And it became quite clear after a while that I was quite good at this. And also that it seemed to make a difference in people's lives. And it felt strongly from day to day that every day that passes that I knew I was not in the right place. So it made sense for me to make a switch into astrology. But to say to dedicate my life to it is a completely different thing. If it was just astrology, then I would have let it remain as a hobby, as it is for, I would say, 99% of people who are into astrology. But to build a career behind it, you have to be really convinced that you can do good in the world. So if it was just down to, hey, Brian, let me read your chart, I'll tell you something cool about your chart. If it was just that, that is a terrible reason to do this as a profession. And I would say it was psychological astrology specifically that gave me the push to make it into a profession. Because if it doesn't give actual practical, tangible outcomes for people, then astrology is just a fun thing to do.
How would you define astrology today, and do you feel that its role or interpretation has changed over, say, the past decade?
I wouldn't say the past decade. I would say it goes back to the past 100 years. So if it's okay that I sort of expand this a little bit, right? We are Asians, and that means astrology has been in our culture, whether you are Indian or Chinese, right? So those are the main ones in Asia. But usually when I get asked this question, the main thing I want to emphasize is the difference, I would say, on a practical level for Western astrology is that we've updated ourselves. So, and why I say that is because back in the 1930s, 1940s, there is quite a famous guy by the name of Carl Jung, who is mostly associated with the world of psychology. And one of the things that he did at the time, which made his teacher, Sigmund Freud, quite unhappy with him, was that he started exploring personality traits and personality profiling, what we know as personality profiling nowadays. And Sigmund Freud thought it was very woo-woo. But Carl Jung wanted to explore everything possible that could tell us more about the human psychology. So in a sense, Carl Jung, being not exactly a professional astrologer, is the father of modern psychological astrology. And because he started to sort of link a lot of the things that the psychologists were noticing about human behavior with what you saw in astrological charts. So it opened the doors for other astrologers to go in and explore on the same lines. So that after that, we saw a very different group of people going into astrology. So not quite your usual tarot card reader or your fortune tellers, but you had people from social work, social psychology, people working with drug addicts, starting to work with astrology. So some of the early movers were people like Donna Cunningham, people like Liz Green, who still have books in circulation today that are widely read by people who are very serious about psychological astrology. There is even a center for psychological astrology in London. You see that Western astrology has updated itself in ways that, to a large extent, Indian or Chinese astrology hasn't quite. So it is, and I'm specifically talking about how it has evolved from being like a fortune telling sort of tool. Like people just want to be curious, how is my 2025 going to be like? I think it's gone far beyond that. But you see, the internet also changed things by quite a bit. Because in the past, before the internet, it was quite necessary for people to go see a professional astrologer to get your chart done. Now, what the internet changed was that now there are automated chart generators. So it meant that anybody, any youngster can just go on a website, just key in your birth information, and it generates a chart. It generates little snippets of interpretation for people to read. You can buy a report. So it was so much easier for people to access astrology. So on the good side, it meant that astrology became a bit more popular in the sense that you didn't have to go through years of study to mathematically be able to cast a chart. But it also meant that the internet brought with it a lot of what I call easy information. So it created this environment of this false sense of that it's easy to learn quite a bit about astrology. So as somebody I don't just practice astrology, I also teach. So what I've discovered in the past, say 10 plus years that I've been teaching astrology is that the landscape is such that the people who go into astrology and decide to learn it are not really looking at it because they just want to know what the best boyfriend for them is going to be like. And I don't think it is as superficial as that. But I also think that because the internet gives you this sense of, if you type the word astrology into the search bar, you get like millions of hits, right? But you could read hundreds of thousands of websites and still not feel like you are getting a good sense of what the chart is actually trying to tell you. So I think that's one of the things that has changed. And prior to us beginning the recording, we were chatting about how people can get things from TikTok. And that's also one of the slight difficulties right now, because as you get lots of people just sharing random little snippets on TikTok, and some of which is not actually factually correct. So as a professional, sometimes it gets a little bit like, if I see something on TikTok, I'll be like, okay, that's actually not correct, but it's got like 1 million views, and you try to sort of correct it, but the corrected version gets like 100 views. So it's I think fighting, we are definitely not the only field in the world that's fighting misinformation, but I wish that there was a more reliable way for people to get good, correct information about what they're seeing online.
In your opinion, how does astrology offer insights in one's emotional patterns or triggers? Can certain astrological placements point to common mental health struggles?
The short answer is yes. But I think when we talk about this thing, mental health struggles, there's a huge spectrum here, right? Is from everything from the people who need to be in a straitjacket in an asylum to random people who are just having a bad day. You know what I'm saying? So, and I would not go as far as to say that astrology is useful for people who really should be seeing a mental health professional. So that I am not suggesting at all that astrology should be applied in those situations. But my experience so far from practicing for the past 20 something years is that the majority of people using astrology they're really regular people. And I wouldn't, in some cases, it's not even a mental health struggle in itself, because what they are facing are the usual things about things like inappropriate jobs. You're in a job that makes a person feel is unrewarding. They are in relationships that don't make them feel like, I want to be with you forever. So when we look into an astrological chart, the main thing that astrology does is that it separates a person's. There's a lot of trash that's in their head, and there are, I would say, thousands of thoughts going on at the same time. It's hard for a person to differentiate between which parts of my thinking are me actually dealing with the problem, and which parts are me trying to prove to people that I'm not a loser. You know what I'm saying? So which is why the good thing about an astrological chart is that it is a language. To most people, of course, if you look at all the symbols, then it looks like Egyptian hieroglyphics lah. But if you actually can read the language, then it's like reading facts and a specific story right off the chart. So whether this person is a good writer, for example, some people write beautifully, and some cannot write to save their lives, right? And of course, then there are people who are very easygoing in a particular area of life. So at work, they can be your best colleague, but don't marry them and don't talk about buying a house together, because suddenly they become very high strung. Suddenly they act like, wow, the whole world is going to die because we're going to buy a house and we'll go broke and die tomorrow. So why is it that some people are so chill in some areas of life and not chill at all in other areas of life? So that's when the chart is very specific. So when we're looking at career, there are indicators for career. And you can be very good in career, but have a lot of authority figure problems. So then it is also very specific that you only have problems, not with subordinates, but you have a lot of problems with people on top, which is the authority figures. So this is how the aha moments show up. And because I've been teaching astrology for so long, that's why I lost count of the number of people who show up trying to learn how to read their charts. And suddenly when the pieces fall into place, they're like, no wonder I can be so happy with this particular person in my life. And then when I was in a relationship with another person, I started behaving in this not very nice way. I'm not even proud of the way I behave in that relationship. But it's being able to differentiate, because otherwise a lot of times people are just thinking that maybe this is a toxic work environment. But then if you've gone to like 5 different companies and it's always a toxic work environment, then you have to start asking questions about what the common denominator is, right? And this is when, especially as people are trying to compare their behavior with other people. So if, for example, you are a person who definitely do not want children, but if you are surrounded by all your friends who are desperate to have kids and they're all spending a fortune on IVF, for example, and it's quite normal for a person to start wondering like, okay, is there something genetically wrong with me? Like, how come I don't have a maternal instinct? Or if you happen to be Singaporean but you're desperate to move overseas and your friends are telling you, hey, why are you not proud of your country? It's like, but sometimes there are people who just desperately want to get out of here. So does that mean that there's something wrong with you? So as you can see, what I'm trying to say here is that quite often the inability to differentiate between when you made a choice, is it because that's what you want? Or is it because all my friends are doing it, maybe I should just do it too? So then people don't seem to know who they are. And which is why when we think about this idea of mental health nowadays, so I'm going to give you a hot take here, okay? Mental health, the word mental health is such a buzzword now. Like everyone's talking about it. I am a supporter of that, but I think we have to make a clear differentiation between an actual health issue, a mental health issue, versus us just being clueless humans who are just trying to make a decision in our life. And a lot of things are understandably stressful. Choosing a job, choosing a major at college, deciding whether you want to marry this person or not, deciding whether you want to be a parent or not. I would say it's not now in the 2000 something years, then we have this problem. I would say people in the medieval times had the same kind of stress as well. And that's why astrology helps normal people with normal life stresses to make sense of what's going on in their life and why they make the choices that they do, and to make it okay if you are making choices that are different from other people.
Are there any particular astrological practices or techniques you use to help clients process emotions or heal from past trauma?
Yes, okay. So I'm primarily known for my work in psychological astrology. So that would be the main technique. The specifics of PA or psychological astrology is not that we practice a different type of astrology. It really isn't. It's more about applying astrology in specific ways. So PA is made out of 25 very specific profiles. And unlike other kinds of profiling tools where you are like one type of profile, so for example, if you do an MBTI profiling test, like you might turn out to be an INFP or something, right? So the assumption being that if a person is INFP, then they will be INFP in every area of life. So that PA takes a slightly different view on things. So as I said earlier, you find that there are different behaviors or certain profiles that seem to show up. So for example, a person with a very strong achiever profile in the career areas will be the hardworking person. They will be there until 2 a.m. Everybody's gone home already. Then that one person is like still slogging there with a sleeping bag under their table. But you can also see that very same person may also have the romantic profile when it comes to dealing with their children. So the romantic profile isn't just about romantic relationships. Romanticity also can mean things like giving your children lots and lots of money because it's like an ideal. Like I want to give my children the best without actually being able to draw practical boundaries. For example, the kid wants a toy, buy him a toy because, isn't life wonderful, right? Until the credit card bill shows up and you can't pay the credit card bill because you have not been practical with your money. So how can it be that the same person can have vastly different behaviors in two different areas of life? Is because there are different psychological profiles that run into their behaviors. So an average person will trigger between 9 to 19 profiles. Some people have very few, some people have a lot. And some of these profiles, they bleed into different areas of life. So you may behave that way with your friends and your children, for example, but you could behave very differently with authority figures. So quite often these profiles can run very, very deep into a person's history. And this is why PA is able to sort of connect specific behaviors to experiences from what they experience with their parents. Sometimes it's a case of people trying to emulate what their parents had done when they were younger. So it's a simple case of monkey see, monkey do. So there are, and sometimes it shows up in very inexplicable ways. For example, if the father happened to be a gambler, and the child realized afterwards, once they end up in my class as adults, that they actually inherited the father's gambling tendencies, perhaps not in the casino, but in the crypto space. So then they end up behaving and taking unnecessary risks and hoping for that one windfall that's going to hit them when Bitcoin hits like a certain price, for example. It's not very much different from some people who go to the casino and roll the dice. You know what I'm saying? So in terms of healing trauma, is an area where I'm going to be very careful with my answer to you, Brian, because I don't want to portray PA as being a tool that can effectively heal trauma. I would not say true to that statement at all. And the reason is quite simple, because astrology, I want to emphasize, is not a healing tool. And even if you book a consultation with a really solid psychological astrologer, I don't think you can expect healing in a direct sort of way. And for a lot of my students, they don't even realize when I make certain statements about them just to get a reaction out of them, you can see this pushback, right? But once I show them, but hey, didn't you say that you did this in your previous job? And they go like, yeah. Okay, and did you also not say that you did this in your previous job? And they go, yeah. And it's like, so why is that statement wrong? And then there's that moment where they pause and go like, huh, now that you mention it, yeah. And then and some people would tell me, May, I'm like 45 years old. I've worked nonstop for the last, I don't know what, almost 30 years. And I just never realized that I do this every time I quit my job. And it means that they end up that I know lots of my students who have had less than amicable endings to their work, and they don't really understand why. And in the moment where the puzzle pieces fit into place, it's almost as if they realize that, wow, I'm the one perpetuating this particular behavior. No wonder I've been so miserable. But you see, the magic happens, Brian, not that the astrologer has healed their trauma, but it requires one very specific thing, which is that an adult person has now taken responsibility for the outcomes that they've gotten so far. So like if they have not been able to commit in relationships, or if they have feel like they are constantly broke their entire adult life, always no money on, right? But it doesn't make sense, because if you have a full-time job and you draw a certain salary, and there are other people with a similar background who are not as broke as you, right? So then there has to be something in between. There is a mystery in the middle that makes a person feel like, hey, how come like life doesn't seem to work for me, huh? Right? And I think when PA is able to color in and to answer those questions, I don't think they heal, but rather once they understand, look, a smart person who knows that if you keep pressing this thing and your hand is very pain, the magic thing is they stop doing it. If they end up picking terrible partners, then after that keep asking, hey, how come my relationship fail again? How come fail again? Then if I can tell them, did you notice that you keep doing this one thing that causes your relationships to fail? A smart person would not do it again. So it doesn't mean that astrology magically makes your life better. It means you stop doing the things that screw up your own life, if for a lack of a better word. Yeah, so not healing, but I think it's people getting a much better understanding about who they are and why they do what they do.
Do you believe that certain astrological transits can trigger a breakthrough in mental health, like moving from a place of struggle to growth?
As far as your listeners may be people who learn astrology, and transits is one of those things in astrology that has this mystical power being given to it. And that's why people live and die by astrological predictions, because it's that feeling that, oh wow, but opportunity has come. It's like I have this, there's something in my chart, there's this transit that tells me I will have a mental breakthrough or something. So basically, if we were to say things like, does a transit trigger a mental breakthrough, then the short answer is no. Because nothing actually triggers a mental breakthrough except yourself. But what actually happens in a transit? Okay, so this is how PA or psychological astrology works. So you see, we always start with understanding who this person is in the first place. So let me give you an example of somebody who has the achiever profile. So this is the person who wants to be top in class. This is the person who, every time they take part in a competition, they want to be in the top 10, if not the person who wins the competition, right? So and quite often these people get to a point in their life where they are burnt out. So for example, the transits, when an astrologer looks at their chart, it may not even affect that particular profile. So for example, a transit could show an astrologer that this person has become very sick. And they work themselves so much, they are not eating properly, they're not sleeping properly, of course they get sick. Right? So then we could make a prediction that okay, between this date to this date, you might be on MC all the time. Right? You might end up going to hospital because you screwed up your digestive system or something, right? So that in itself does not mean that this person is going to have a breakthrough. However, there are also other indications, say there are other transits which may indicate that this person is now unable to be the achiever. So perhaps projects happen where they are unable to participate because they are lying in hospital somewhere. So it's not that the transit triggers a breakthrough, but it is that moment where this person has matured enough to realize that you keep putting your identity on the last achievement that you got. But there's that point of emptiness when they're lying in a hospital bed, right? That makes that person realize that, for what? I got all these awards for what? Right? Because I could die tomorrow if my stomach stops working. So it's a bit like that person realizing that maybe I need a different way to define my identity, that my achievements are just not everything. So it's like, I suppose on one hand, people would say that, oh yeah, because he got that transit, that's why he got a mental breakthrough. And the reason why I don't subscribe to that perspective is because then if I agreed to that statement, it means that if there wasn't a transit, it means this person is not going to have a breakthrough. Right? So then essentially we don't have any free will. There's no agency in your life. Then you just sit around, lor, then you wait, you ask the astrologer, so where am I going to get this transit? Then if I tell you the year 2045, then how you want to wait 20 years for a breakthrough, right? So that perspective is not helpful to a person. Right. And so basically, I would say to have agency in your life, the faster we understand how we operate, do you really have to wait until you're lying in hospital before you decide that achievements are not everything? You know what I'm saying? So for a person to, the moment they start feeling stressed in a very unhealthy way, then it's time to address it already. So then you don't have to wait till bad things happen. Yeah, because frankly, if you are telling me about some wonderful event that happens that triggers someone to have a breakthrough, let me tell you, it's usually not a nice event. It's that, are we talking about the day you wake up and realize that your marriage is over? So let's not get there. You know what I'm saying? Let's try to understand these things so that you make responsible decisions for yourself and the people around you. Yeah.
What do you think is the most misunderstood or underappreciated aspect of astrology, especially by skeptics or those new to the practice?
The biggest misunderstanding about astrology, I think, is the fact that even just the word astrology is the butt of jokes. It's if you watch like a lot of like TV shows or whatever, and it's like if somebody wanted to be sarcastic, they would say things like, oh yeah, let me check with my astrologer. And they didn't mean it. They basically mean like it's like a stupid thing, or that person is so unintelligent they actually believe in astrology. So basically, just the concept of astrology itself is the butt of jokes. But you see, the interesting thing is that when it is portrayed that way, it's the kind of thing that's often said by the very people who actually know nothing about astrology. I don't blame them, right? Because you see, for the way, the one big nasty thing about astrology is that it's very bad. It has very bad PR. It is the one field of study in the world that I think has done a terrible job of navigating the whole branding and PR thing. Because most people know astrology from being that little horoscope snippet in a magazine or a newspaper or on some website, because we just started our 2025, right? So people will just go and see what their fortune is like. Or if you're a Gemini, then it's like, what is February 2025 going to be for you? And I don't blame the average layman on the street for thinking that this stuff is trash, because let me tell you, it is. None of those horoscopes work. And the reason is very simple. You see, the average person is quite well educated nowadays. And if you do your math, right, you take 8 billion people in the population, divide by 12 different signs, right, then you realize very quickly that something like a few 100 million people have the same sign as you. So how does it make sense that all the Geminis in the world are going to fall in love this month? So that makes no sense whatsoever. And so I fully understand why astrology has this really bad rep. But I would say that this thing is not just about me saying that, like, give my trait some respect. It's not just that, but also that actually, unbeknownst to a lot of people, if you take yourself away from what I call TikTok astrology, okay, so if we go away from just like random people freaking out about Venus or Mars retrograde, right, or Mercury retrograde as it might be, but we're talking about the people who actually study astrology. And because astrology is really difficult to do, you'll find that actually the majority of these people are on the spectrum of education. They are really on the higher end. So we're talking about people who are engineers. I have students who are doctors, lawyers, people who are project managers, who lead organizations. In fact, I would say among my students, more than half of my students belong in that category, very PMET. However, my students, many of them will also come to class and say, hey, I never tell anyone that I come for astrology class. And I ask them, why is that? And they go like, yeah, I just don't want to lose my credibility, I'm like a well-respected civil engineer or something. It's like the last thing I want people to know is that, hey, you believe in this stuff. I thought you're very clever that why you believe in astrology, So this is what I mean by astrology is associated with that 15-year-old girl who's just trying to find out about her boyfriend. You know what I'm saying? So that's the difficult part, that it is not that stupid people study astrology. It is that the smart people who study astrology don't want to ever talk about it. Which is why you see that it is like this dirty secret that people don't talk about, because it is the butt of jokes. And so even as for myself, I have been on the faculty. I was one of the lecturers at the International Academy of Astrology. My colleagues include people who worked at NASA. They are literal rocket scientists. So the thing is, the people who really study astrology, by any measure, you would consider them to be fully contributing members of society, and they're very, very competent people. But there's only a very small group of us who are going online, posting videos. Most people are happy to stay under the radar because you don't want to be the butt of jokes. So that, I would say, number one biggest misunderstood thing about astrology.
If you could look at astrological charts of someone from a completely different culture or time period, past to present, who would it be and what unique insights do you think their chart would offer, considering their societal context?
You know, Brian, actually we do this a lot. So basically, it's not like if I could study the chart of some famous random person. In fact, we do that in learning astrology. I've done thousands of those charts. Basically, we look at like royalty, we look at famous writers, and basically your Mao Zedong or whatever. It's like and the reason why we do that is because you can't really learn astrology unless you've done lots and lots and lots of charts. The nature of what I usually teach in class is that I actually encourage my students to do, especially when you're in the learning phase, not in the practice phase. When you are learning, it's better to read charts of people who have already died. And the reason is simple. For example, you're a relatively young guy, right, Brian? Now, if I were to read your chart, I have there is no way I can get a full picture of who you are because you haven't it's not like you've had kids growing up yet, right? It's not like you've hit your midlife crisis yet, and you've not got to a point where you are mentoring youngsters. You know what I'm saying? So, like, how then could we even verify that what kind of mentor you would be, because you might not have gone to that stage of life yet? But it's very different when we do charts of people who have already died. But the nature of these people, quite frankly, Brian, another difficulty that often happens with astrology is that it requires an accurate birth time. So, and the funny thing is that usually happens with the Westerners, mainly because for them, they don't have this hang up about birth information the way Asian people do. So it's very, very hard to find the birth time of a famous Chinese person. Like, I don't actually know if this birth time is available, but I suppose if you try looking for like Zhang Yimou or something, I don't think you could find it because Chinese people are just, like very anal about birth information. But you could find, like, say, Charlie Chaplin, no problem. But to answer your question on a deeper level, okay, so what kind of insights do we get when the social context is different? I can tell you a very simple thing. There are actually very few differences in the context when we're studying a chart. Because at the end of the day, what people are interested in are things like family, relationships, career, getting respect, social prestige. It's what we face today in 2025 are the same considerations that someone would face in 1925, for example. So what I would say the biggest insight is how little people have changed, because humans are just humans. So maybe now we work with laptops, which they didn't have in the past, but their relationship with tools, their relationship with colleagues is quite shocking how little people change over the decades and centuries, actually.
Mercury retrograde has become a widely discussed phenomenon, with the next one in mid-March. It is often linked to periods of disruption and unpredictability, with many believing it affects everything from our moods to our actions. In your experience, how do these retrograde cycles shape romantic relationships then? Can they act as a catalyst for resolving emotional conflicts or shedding light on hidden truths about our attractions and connections?
Now, the planet that is actually associated with disruption and unpredictability is not Mercury, it is Uranus. If you want to read the newspapers and see a lot of like funny, weird things happening, then if you're looking at Mercury retrograde, you're looking at the wrong planet. Okay, so Mercury is very specific. It's not disruption, it's not unpredictability, it is actually a thought process. Let me just go a bit technical first. Okay, so the planet Mercury moves in the sky. It doesn't like stop moving, right? So basically, when it's operating normally, it's when we communicate. So what's key themes associated with Mercury are things like communication, decision making, processing data. So when things are operating normally, then it's just like business as usual. But when it goes retrograde, the meaning of the word retrograde means it's an optical illusion. That means it appears from our perspective on Earth that the planet is moving backwards. Of course, it's not. Planets don't go stun, right? So basically, it's an optical illusion. So what actually occurs is that for everyone on Earth, and this is not specific to any individual, it's a human whole world sort of thing, right? That Mercury doesn't like stop, like in the sense that it's not like we all stop thinking and our brains stop operating, right? But it's that people slow down. So rather than making a decision, it's a point where people just stop, pause a bit, and they say things like, okay, wait, before we press the button, but then we pressed the button before. And the last time we pressed it, there were some issues, right? Maybe we should just like jotomate a bit, right? And then go through the thought process again. Or perhaps someone might say, okay, but what if we change a few things, tweak a few parameters? So when you ask me about relationships, so again, Mercury has technically has nothing to do with relationships. Again, that's the wrong planet. We're looking at Venus. So I would not say that Mercury retrograde has a direct effect on relationships per se, but could it? Yes. So for example, if there was something that you desperately wanted to say to your wife, but you kind of sat on it for a long time because you thought like maybe she might be offended or it might hurt her feelings or something, right? And then you just don't say anything. But during the Mercury retrograde period, it's almost like because you are quieter, there's not so much rubbish in your head, right? And then you start to notice that, okay, every day that I delay my authenticity with my wife, then I notice that it affects other family members. So eventually, so there's this period of like, he's like mulling over his idea. You know what I'm saying? Like he's just thinking through what might be the consequences if I decide to sit her down and say, okay, I got something to tell you, right? And at the end of it, he will make a decision. So of course, positively, it would be great if he decides that, okay, let me find a way to talk to her properly about this thing, which frankly would be the best outcome. But of course, he may also make another decision, which is that, okay, I decided not to talk to her about it, and there's a good legitimate reason why. Right, but what you don't want is that people come out from that situation and then they still limbo, still like haven't decided whether want to talk to her or not. So in the case of a relationship, could it bring to a head? For example, if some people were thinking about ending a relationship, maybe a guy is thinking, I am thinking about proposing to her, ask her to be my wife, right? Or to make a different commitment. And this happens with business relationships as well. So can it affect relationships? Yes, but not in the sense that Mercury retrograde affects relationships. It affects communication and thought process. So this can also be, by the way, not just relationships, like people are thinking about whether to quit their jobs, right? Or whether to speak up about something that they don't agree with in the workplace. So not relationships, but decision making and communication.
From what we have been dissecting, astrology is often tied to personal growth, but do you think it could be used as a tool for collective or societal healing? How might we apply astrological insights to help heal larger global issues?
I mean, of course, I mean, notwithstanding what I said earlier about healing, because I really don't think that if I made like 1,000 astrology videos, I can heal all the issues that are happening in the world right now. I wish that was the case. If it was, I think I'll shoot videos nonstop, okay? But if we think about the collective humanity, what could potentially happen, and it's what I've tried to do in the last 5 years since the COVID years, is to try and explain to people why some of these nasty things are happening in the world. So, for example, if you notice that there's a lot of anger in the world right now. People are angry about inequality, and there's a lot of polar divisions, right? You get people. Some people say vaccinate, some people say don't vaccinate. Then some people say gay okay, some people say gay not okay. You know. So basically, there are so many ways to divide people. And I think for the average person who isn't an extremist on either end, is that frustration, right? Because you don't, because it seemed like 10, 15 years ago the world wasn't like that, leh. Like what happened? So I think it's more like so my answer to that is the same as what I said earlier about healing personal individual traumas. I think what is useful is that astrology is like think a bit of it like a blood test. You know how like sometimes you feel like your shoulder pain, or like you wake up, then your head feels a bit funny, right? And the next thing you know is you go to a professional, usually a doctor, who recommends certain tests that they want to do, a blood test, MRI, whatever, right? And the idea is that it gives you all these stats and data, and then the professional helps to interpret it. So they may say things like, okay, I think your white blood cell count is too high, or whatever it is, right? And perhaps you need to eat more or something, or you need to rest more or something, right? But you see, it is a diagnostic process. Basically, the idea is to figure out what is causing this problem, why this person is dizzy all the time. And only when we know where the problem is, then we can start talking about the solution to the problem. Astrology does that for individuals, And I'm also suggesting that astrology could potentially do that for the world, as you say, is to figure out where's the anger coming from, right? And why are certain groups of people feeling very divided from other groups of people? And again, that is not a solution, right? So of course there are a lot of these analysts, there are political analysts, economic analysts, and everybody's got their idea of what they think the problem is, and I think it's a very different ball game from executing and implementing a solution. But of course, a good first step is to accurately say what the issue is. And I think that helps. And also another thing that I want to add on here is that, because you see, we have to be very realistic for people like you and I you are like one individual, right? Now, if you think that you can diagnose the issue and then you post a YouTube video and say, hey guys, I got the solution to the problem, let's all go and change things, that's not realistic. So what I would say for the people listening to this podcast, right, and if you belong to that group of people who are a bit frustrated at watching parts of the world burn, and then you just don't feel like you're doing something to improve things. And in a way, it contributes to that mental health issue that you talk about, right? It's not that there's something mentally wrong with them, but it's that frustration that you feel a bit useless, right? That you can't do good things. Then I think on individual levels, we want to look at how people can help others in our personal life. Because frankly, I mean, a political situation, there's not very much you as an individual can do about it, but you can change your immediate environment. So basically, you can have an effect on your workplace, on your family, in the immediate community or neighborhood, for example. And I think being able to understand why people behave the way they do. So if you can diffuse angry people in your personal life, for example, that's helping to diffuse 2 or 3 angry people in the world. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you can't make like angry German people, like unhappy German people. You can't make them happy, but you can make the uncle next door a bit happier. You know what I'm saying? So in a sense, I think it gives understanding and control back into people's lives. Because if you think you can control like weird people in other countries, that's not happening.
As you wrap it up shortly, what would you say to someone who is somewhat interested in integrating astrology into his or her mental health journey, but also hesitant to fully embrace it? Also, where can people reach out to you?
My suggestion to the people that you describe is, first of all, I don't think it's necessary to embrace astrology. Even as a professional for the last 20-something years, I don't think I would describe myself as embracing astrology, because it's not a religion. You don't have to believe in astrology. I get people asking me about, do you believe in astrology? It's not a religion, right? It is a tool. So if you ask the doctor that, do you believe in medical reports? I mean, I use it lah, but and I believe that it is accurate, but I don't have to believe in it like it's a religion, right? So don't stress about that. But I think it's more like you want to make sure that you are learning properly. So of course, ideally, if I can plug my school, of course, ideally you come and learn from me lah. I'm a really good teacher, right? But if people want to learn on their own, then I would suggest really taking the time to know the ABCs. I think learning the ABCs in a very structured, foundational way gives people confidence and accuracy. The issue is that when it is not accurate and people just kind of like, as in Singapore, we say anyhow say, right? Then first of all, it undermines the credibility of astrology, because then or you end up with very vague readings like, oh, Mercury retrograde, this is why your brain is messy. Then okay, great. So now my brain is messy, and then what? So you want to get to specificity. Yeah. So basically, you want to be quite sure that you are reading from or getting your information from people who can explain it in very clear, differentiated ways, and not like random emotional responses to astrology. That's what I would say. Yeah, but as you say, you ask how can people get in touch with me. For the people who are interested in exploring what an education looks like, the best place to go would be my website. So that would be www.selfstrology.com. And that is the website of my academy. So typically people start from like a basic level where they get a very good solid foundation on the planets, the signs, the houses, and also how to detect imbalances, right? And the people who are very interested in psychological astrology can go on to level 2, where I start doing PA. And that is usually when we start wading into the weeds lah.
Thank you so much once again for your time today.
Thank you very much. You've asked me very good questions. Thank you.
We've been speaking to May Sim, founder of Selfstrology Academy.